Hi Blockheads, welcome to month 4 of the 2021 block of the month at Bee Quilting. This month we're going to make 2 blocks just like we have been. One will look like a maple leaf, the other one like a baseball. Okay, what is in your packet this month? When you open it up, this is what you'll have. A wider strip of raspberry color, a strip of salmon color, and 2 squares of white. Okay, these 2 squares of white are for the second block, the baseball block. So you can put those away and keep them, maybe back in your bag. And you're gonna cut from these 2 strips. From the salmon, you're gonna cut 2 3¼ inch blocks and 4 2½ inch blocks. And from the raspberry, you're gonna cut 2 3¼ inch blocks, 1 2½ inch block, and 2 1½ inch blocks. Okay, the first thing that you have to do is you have to make half square triangles. So if you have a magic wand, this handy dandy little thing, you might want to get that out. And if you have a smaller ruler of some kind, you might want that for trimming up. Okay, I am going to sew the half square triangles this month and show you again. But if there are more half square triangles going forward, we won't be demonstrating those because we've done these several times. Okay, but we are going to do that. So the first thing you need to do is you need to use your magic wand and you need to sew, you need to mark 2 lines, a 1/4 inch from the middle. So if you don't have a magic wand, mark the diagonal and then mark 1/4 inch on each side, and you're going to sew on the outside lines. The other thing you might want to do right away is on these 2 small 1½ inch blocks, you want to mark the diagonal. Not on each side of it, just the diagonal. Okay, so then all your marking would be done. So we're going to take these 2 blocks, we're going to take 1 salmon and 1 raspberry, and same thing here, 1 salmon and 1 raspberry, and we want them so the edges, everything is matched up really well. Remember, accurate cutting makes that possible. And now we're going to sew on these 2 lines and these 2 lines. Remember, our stitch length should be at 1.8. Okay. I'm going to use a little bit of chain piecing here. And I'm going to sew this line on this block. And then I'm going to put this block on here. And I'm just going to sew right onto this one. And I'm going to snip these apart. And now I'm going to sew the other 2 lines. Oh, not the same one. We want to sew a different line this time. Okay, and then if you remember, after we get these lines sewn, then we cut right down the center. And press the seams open. So that's our next step. Okay. Get that out of the way. And here's where I like the smaller ruler. I have a little more control. So I put this right along the diagonal. And I cut these apart. Okay, and same thing here. And then I'm going to press these seams open, and then we're going to trim these up. We're going to square them up, not trim them up, square them up. Okay. Now we press them open. First we pressed as we sewed. It also gets rid of the friction pen lines. And now press them open.
There's that amazing friction pen line gone again. And we'll end up, remember we sewed, it seemed like we were making 2, but now we end up with 4.
Half square triangles are like rabbits.
They kind of are like rabbits. They multiply very easily.
They don't open very easily.
No, they don't. Probably be easier if I wasn't bending over the sewing machine. Okay, last one. Okay, now the part that quite a few of you have had to come in and review. So let's do it one more time. Okay, this is too big. We want this to measure 2.5 inches. So we're going to use this diagonal line on our ruler. Okay, and we're going to lay that, let me get rid of this ruler, it's in the way. We're going to lay that diagonal line,
The 45.
yes, the 45 one, right along our seam line, which is at that same diagonal. Now, a couple things to note. We want to trim this to 2.5. So we also want to be able to trim on all 4 sides. So on this first side, we just want to trim a little bit. And we want to make sure that we have extra here. Here's our 2.5 inch, and here's the extra.
So you want to trim more on the second cut.
Yes, you do want to trim more on the second cut. On the first cut, you just want to trim a little bit so that you know you're getting a nice square edge. And you're going to get it squared if this is on if your seam line is on the 45-degree line. Okay, so now I'm going to trim here, the side, the right side, and the top. Okay, and always pull away before you lift your ruler. All right, now I'm going to lift my ruler and I'm going to turn this twice. All right, and now I'm going to do the exact same thing, but now I have more lines to line up. I want the seam line to be on the 45, and I want the cut edges, the edges I just cut, to be exactly on the 2.5. So see, now I have more to trim. Okay, so I'm going to trim and trim. And see, that's why you always pull that away first. All right, so now I know that I've trimmed evenly, that I have the same amount of fabric on each side of my seam line. Okay, one more time. Okay, I'm going to put this on here so that my 45-degree line matches up to my seam line. I'm going to make sure I have a little bit to trim on these 2 sides and that I have plenty left over beyond the 2.5 mark here. All right, trim, trim. Okay, 2 turns, 1, 2. But mostly what's important is that these 2 lines that these 2 edges that I've already cut are going to go on the 2.5 inch mark here, and that my 45-degree mark goes on my seam line. Still not there. Just keep playing, it'll work out. 2.5, 2.5, and the 45. Remember, you're always better off with more to trim the second time. Okay?
If you can't make that all line up, what does that mean?
That your first cut was incorrect. So turn it back around and see if you can salvage it by making your first cut again. If you absolutely can't get it to line up, you did something wrong the first time. But it all might not be lost. You might be able to fix it. Okay. The top one is always the harder cut to make. You're at a funny angle. Turn it. Line up the 2.5s and the 45. And trim again. and last one. Remember, on the first line up, you only need to be sure that the 45 is on the diagonal and that you have extra here and here. So trim the extra on the side and the top. That stubborn little thing. Turn it so that I'm going to be lining up with my cut edges on the 2.5 and the seam line on the 45. Let's see if I can do it the first time this time. Ta-da! Whoop! I did it. I did it different. I made it different. Okay, so now I have 4 of those. That's what I need. All right, and the other square that we need to do this time is the bottom part of the maple leaf's little stem. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this raspberry 2.5 inch. Wait, no, that's not right. We're going to take a salmon 2.5 inch, and we're going to put these raspberry squares on 2 of the corners. Okay, now, what's important here is that your line is exactly to the corners on the diagonal, and that when you line this up, you're lined up exactly here and exactly here, so it's almost like you're replacing this corner. And now we're going to sew on that line. Okay, I'm going to check and make sure. Everything is lined up. And now I'm going to sew exactly on that line. I'm heading for the other corner. Okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite corner. Okay, we're going to line up so that the diagonals are exactly in the corners, and then sew across those corners. What we're creating here is the stem. Okay, now we're going to check. And we're going to check by, we're going to pull this back this way, and we're going to make sure that this is straight here and this is straight here.
Oh, just like the flying geese from last week.
Yes, like the flying geese, but these don't cross over each other. These are on opposite corners. Okay, so those look good. So I'm going to trim off these seam allowances at 1/4 inch. And they're kind of hard to see. Even with my friction pen line, they're hard to see. Okay, and now we're going to press those open as well. And we'll get rid of the friction pen line. And we'll press these open. And then we're going to lay out our block. Okay, we're ready to lay out our block. If you look, you will have a little diagram. In your packet, and in this case, this darker color is the salmon color, and the lighter color is the raspberry color. So we're going to start with the raspberry one here. Then a 1/2 square triangle and another 1/2 square triangle. This is the bottom corner and it goes this way. And one of these goes here One of these goes here. And I think this is hard to do because to me, these are kind of the opposite. Like I want the light to be the lighter color and the dark to be the darker color. Does that look right?
Yes.
All right. So this is the way it's going to get constructed. And now what you're going to do is something you've done before. You're going to sew these three together, and these three together. And then you're going to press your seams opposite. Okay, you're going to press these seams out, these seams in toward the middle, these seams out, and then they'll nest when you go to sew this one to this one, and this one to this one, and you'll have a completed block. Remember, when it's done, it should measure 6.5 inches, so remember to use your scant 1/4 inch. Okay? When we come back, we'll do the other block, which is the baseball block.